right. We will call this meeting to order. This is the Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee. Let's see, got my papers backwards here. So we'll start at welcome and introductions, and I'll go first. I'm David Shadd. I'm the Chief Programs Officer here at the Hope Center.
Christina Allison, Regan's Bluegrass.
Sorry.
For now.
I'm Naomi Clewitt with Lexington Public Library. I'm Jessica Cannon, a friend of Naomi, and she introduced me to this particular committee. I'm a ordained clergy with the Disciples of Christ.
Ronald Delgado, Jubilee Jobs, and OHIP Board.
Sarah Criswell, Arbor Youth Services.
Sherry Penny, Mountain Call.
Janelle Laws, RV.
Erica Dominguez, Lexington Rescue Mission.
Terry Jo Dion, Central Christian Church.
Marty Jones, Community Action Council.
Tony Smith, Bluegrass Care Navigator.
And got a couple more folks joining us. If you want to introduce yourselves while you find a seat.
TC Johnson, Fayette County Public Schools, Family and Community Engagement.
Jamie Cody, Bluegrass Care Navigators.
And I'm Jeff Herron, Manager, LFUCG, Office of Homelessness, Prevention and Intervention.
Good to see a chair. If you all want to review the minutes for the next meeting. Or if you all would like to review the minutes for the last meeting.
Those were included in the meeting packet. Feel free to let us know as you look through of any corrections that need to be made.
All right, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move.
Okay.
Thank you.
Christina moves.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who was the second? Oh, thank you.
All in favor? Opposed?
All right.
We have official meeting minutes.
And Marissa's actually in training today, so her items will be mine.
Okay. So turn it over to Jeff for our new business.
I apologize, we do have a slightly lighter agenda today. That's due largely in part to some of the work that my office is currently doing to prepare for winter response and also to kick off the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness. Hopefully you saw, if you receive our emails, our winter weather plan went out today. There will be additional information circulated about the temporary winter shelter on Versailles Road, such as exactly what time we're going to open. I'm still awaiting the phone number for the shelter itself, so I'll give you some additional details in the very near future. I just ask that people hold off on individual questions about that and let me get all the information together and send it to you as a group, but I wanted to go ahead and get the majority of the information out to everybody in advance because I know both providers and those in need of assistance are eager to know all the details. So thank you for that. Also, there should be a press release very soon about the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness. We'll be holding our initial meeting on Wednesday, November 12th, which is going to be following the Continuum of Care Board meeting in the same location, the Phoenix Building, 3rd floor conference room. So if you have plans to attend our COC board meeting, you could always stay and stick around for the task force meeting. I'm going to leave it to the mayor's office to communicate details to the public about the membership and give it their send-off. But for now, I wanted to go ahead and announce that date. It'll be at 3:30 p.m., again, following the COC board meeting, Phoenix Building at 101 East Vine Street, 3rd floor conference room. Now to the item that I'm actually supposed to be speaking about, which is the 2026 Lex Count. Very strange to be talking about 2026 because this year has flown by. And we are already planning for our point in time count, which we brand as the Lex Count for our community. Right now, we are tentatively planning that count will take place on the evening of Wednesday, January 28th. We'll work with the other continuums of care to communicate about how everyone's going to approach the count. We usually try to do ours on the same evening as the balance of state, so that way we can better ensure that there's not duplication between our efforts. But for now, what we want to discuss is our initial planning meeting. Marissa will be sending out an email through our contact list. So definitely, if you have not already signed up for a contact list, think about indicating on the sign-in sheet that you would like to receive those and provide us your email. We are going to hold an initial planning meeting via Teams so that people can participate regardless if they have other places to be. It's going to be on Wednesday, November 5th at 10 a.m. So some of the things that we'll be discussing throughout our planning meetings will be things like the methodology that we're going to use to conduct our count. We'll review the surveys that we use for both our interview-based survey and our observation-based survey for the unsheltered count. We obviously will need to incorporate any requirements that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has for us for data submission, but we can also take a look at if there's any kind of local data that we desire to collect through that process. And we'll begin talking also about things like building care packages that we can deliver to those who are experiencing homelessness that our enumerators encounter in the field, various different subjects related to how that count functions. So definitely we welcome you to come and be a part of that conversation. If you do not receive that information for any reason, feel free to reach out directly, but we'll be getting that out to you, I would imagine, probably this week. Any questions about the Lex count at this stage? All right. Then if not, on the next item as well. So, we have been having conversations within this committee about some areas that we want to focus on strategy development. And the last conversations that we've had have been around increasing earned income for our participants. We have seen a number of proposals about federal assistance programs. Right now, we're still kind of in the dark about what might be coming down the line. We had been told there would be an annual continuum of care or COC program competition to be announced through a notice of funding opportunity. So far, a NOFO has not been released. The National Alliance is still engaging in advocacy, asking that they have folks contact their congressional representatives and ask that we not have a competition this year. We applied last year under a 2-year NOFO and we're told that there would be no application this year. So definitely one thing is providers are concerned about the timeline. Generally, we would have a notice of funding opportunity around summer and have at least 2 months or so to prepare that application and submit. So we would be really concerned about introducing a NOFO around the holidays and right at the end of the calendar year and what that would mean for how much time providers had to prepare project applications and how much time that we had as a COC to work on our collaborative application. However, what we are hearing, there was a recent article in Politico, and that alleges that they have information from HUD staffers which are informing them that we could be looking at a cap on how much of our COC dollars can be used specifically on permanent housing, and that would be a 30% cap. Presently, the Continuum of Care program is our largest source of funding for housing programs, specifically permanent housing in the form of rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. You'll probably recall at one point there was also a proposal that the COC program would be consolidated with ESG and operate under those guidelines, which would cap rental assistance at 2 years for any household. So regardless of what form these changes ultimately take, it's very clear to us that the overlying theme is restricting the level of rental assistance that's available to people and the length or duration that a household can receive that assistance. So in trying to be smart and proactively plan, this is one of the areas that we've chosen to focus on. Marissa took the notes from our previous discussions and placed them onto a grid in terms of how important that individuals felt like some of the different interventions that we could pursue are, but also how feasible they are. That document was included in your packet, and you're going to see kind of some things that you would expect. For example, representing one of the areas that is of high importance to us, but we definitely see some challenges in feasibility. It is affordable housing. We know that that's complex, and while we do have things that we're trying to do as a city to accommodate the development, acceleration of affordable housing, we know that that's something that this group alone is probably not going to be able to fully resolve with the level of funding that we have. We are going to continue those conversations with entities like the Office of Affordable Housing so we can see how we might complement their projects, doing things like how can we use maybe our dollars to fund services that can go with housing. But the level of funding that we currently have, which is right now around 1.4 million for the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, that's not enough for us to really directly be the developer of affordable housing. So we'll continue those kinds of conversations, but then you can see if we kind of move across that document, you have high importance, high feasibility, and we have some things that are very doable on that kind of a budget or for the resources that we have. For example, and you'll see multiple stars because several people want to see some transportation assistance, suggesting things like bus passes and bicycles. We are currently in conversations with Lextran, kind of working on that as we have time between their renovation of the transit center and our development of the task force and winter resources. But we think that we have identified a potential pathway to get our transportation program that we previously operated with Lextran that provided up to 1 year free bus pass for individuals that were meeting the literal homeless definition and that were involved in housing case management. So ideally, when we come back together in December, we might workshop with you all some of the challenges that we might have had with the previous iteration of the program and get some input on how we can modify that to make it more effective, easy to access, easy for people to use, and maximize that benefit. Really, what I would kind of like for us to try to do today is looking at now seeing visually some of the suggestions that people were coming up with, where we think that we want to focus some of our efforts. My team will be able to conduct more research in those areas, and we can bring it back to this group so that as we close out the calendar year, we can move some of those items towards things like releasing requests for proposals and actually developing those programs and funding them in calendar year 26. So now that we've had a couple brainstorming exercises and we have some input from the group, definitely want to open this up if there's additional notes about where you would like to see us focus, if there are examples of programs or models that you want us to be trying to research, definitely opening the table for further discussion of anything that you would like for us to be doing in this area. Does this seem to represent our previous conversations?
I think so.
Okay.
I think like, I don't know, in terms of like the green box there with the high importance, high feasibility, I think thinking through like what the next steps would be, you've already taken the step with Lex Trainer, started that conversation. So I guess what are some of the things that we can do with the other items?
Anybody have any thoughts on next steps that we could take in any of these areas? For example, let's look, since we have at least 3 people that really wanted to see mobile job coaches. How do we envision that? Is that a team that goes out like street outreach in a vehicle? Is it a funded program that visits locations like shelters and day centers? as providers, as stakeholders that work with this population, what do you think we should be exploring as the potential next steps in this area?
I can maybe just list out some of the job coaching or job counseling programs that we do at Jubilee, just kind of to frame some of the conversations. So obviously we have our in-person program at our community center on 2nd Street. But then I think we do some, variety of what you would call mobile job coaching. We do a program at the Fayette County Detention Center called the Second Chance Academy. And then more recently, we do some programming with the city of Lexington at their Davis Center Workforce Development Center. Really, the only other thing that I can think of is we've started trying to do more outreach to a lot of recovery residences. Like last week, as an example, we did our job coaching program, the orientation for it at Tracy's house, which is a recovery program here in town. And so as we get recovery residences that come and reach out, we'll try to schedule to have one counselor at least do intake at those sites. Now, as far as like getting the client, the person that's needing the coaching in, that can fluctuate between doing it wherever they're at, whether that's at a shelter or at a community center. But most of the time, we try to find a way via bus passes, via some other method to try to get them in our community center. Just because that's such a centralized hub that we have for other resources on here, like interview close, mock training, etc.
And so, for example, I know at 535 you all currently have 2 weekly orientations, Mondays at 9 and Thursdays at 1 p.m.
Yeah, so Mondays at 9, Thursdays at 1, and then we will typically ask clients to come and do a follow-up. That's just another workshop on interviewing and conflict resolution, and those happen Tuesdays at 1, Fridays at 9. And I can send a flyer or some materials that we have to the group just to have those dates in mind.
So definitely some things I can think of right away is, as we would receive something like that, a flyer, we can always go ahead and create a repository where we can store those documents that everyone has access to them. What kind of capacity do you all have at your orientations?
So we fluctuate. So at most orientations, I would say that they tend to average to be around 10 to 20 people at a time. Now that varies. We have had them on the high end where we're getting 25, 30 people in. But our sweet spot really is 10 to 20. I mean, we have 3 to 4 job counselors that are routinely meeting with people. Now, a lot of them meet with people through our different programs, but if we get an orientation of 20 people that come in, those 20 people would be split between 4 or 5 different job counselors. So 10 to 20 is usually the sweet spot we look for. But those orientations happen weekly, right? So our scheduling, we try to see the first, say, half the people that attend the orientation on that day, and then if we have to schedule them out for a scheduling conflict, we try to make it within 2 to 3 days.
Okay. So a couple things that I'm hearing just talking through this, we definitely have an access situation where we have to figure out how we provide that access. Is this somebody that's going to a location like our shelters, as you're doing with some of these recovery programs, or maybe it's a shelter shuttling people to your orientation? But it sounds like on the back end, if we have an orientation that's split across multiple different job coaches, we're probably also going to have to put some dollars behind some staffing for an organization to be able to scale up to meet this kind of a demand. And potentially another thought would be, I know from just conversations with Mason that there's a high number of persons that you all work with that would be housing insecure. Do you have any estimate or guess of how many individuals would be dealing with homelessness?
A very rough number. And
I'm sure it's going to be rough.
Yeah, rough number. And I think the definition we use internally is the more expansive definition, much in line with the Department of Education. I would say, again, very rough, probably around 60%. It's pretty significant.
with that level, I mean, something else that we could explore if the resources were there would be maybe a dedicated orientation that might be for specifically this population. And we can also think about the fact that Jubilee Jobs is the partner that could do this kind of work. We also have folks like Goodwill that we could bring into this conversation. I don't think they're here today, but we could definitely have that as a conversation. We could put out RFPs that would provide funding for the levels of staffing that are needed. Does this feel like it truly reflects that there was a high level of interest on this document from our previous conversations? Does this still feel like it's something that you guys want us to move toward? Trying to figure out what your most important items on the wish list are.
From our perspective, because I'm, again, focusing on our students and our families, in the role that I now have with community involvement, one of our projects that we now have is we are seeking to put together what we call a community pop-up mobile. And so we just actually, we kind of piloted it just kind of on the fly. We don't have a mobile, but we're showing up. We did one yesterday in the Northern Elementary School area at the church there, and it was a pop-up, and we actually invited community partners. What we are hoping to do with that mobile is to be able to go into the communities now where people are and be able to help them, like if they needed to apply for an application or if they needed to meet with a coach, then there is somebody there that can provide that resource and that information with them for that. So that is something that we're now in the works. Hopefully we can get it done. But right now we're gonna, our next step is, as winter comes up, as we're now working on that, is to work with our community shelters or organizations, their neighborhood organizations, to see if we can do pop-ups in their shelters in those neighborhoods and still be able to invite our community partners out to take the information to our families.
We have to think again about the effectiveness of bringing services to people, especially when they might not be likely to seek those out for themselves or have barriers to doing so. At Jubilee Jobs, do you all ever have any, does anyone ever volunteer with you all? Is there any volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the areas right now that we're looking to significantly scale. We have a couple routine volunteers that we have come in, mainly for a lot of our auxiliary programs. So we have volunteers that come in to do some mock interviews with some of our clients, or we have a volunteer that we're onboarding right now. It's going to help us do reentry roadmaps or reentry plans for our second chance clients at Fayette County Detention Center. So there are opportunities there that we're continuing to develop. As of right now, actually, we're kind of getting a brain trust over there to put together defined roles to get people to then volunteer with us. So still in development.
Because, you know, we do have, obviously, folks in the community that I think want to help, and so another potential strategy that we could get further development in this area would be to fund some kind of volunteer recruitment management kind of program that would tap into folks that maybe want to directly help and provide them with some training and education so they could maybe be an effective volunteer job coach, for example. Also thinking about bringing services to people. If we were to develop something that was kind of a pop-up service, do you think there was a possibility of us bringing it to the library? Do you all at the library, I know in the past there's been like a variety of different courses, educational opportunities at the library. Do you all presently have anything that would be kind of touching on the area of employment that might give anyone resume building skills or anything like that?
We had a dedicated person working on that who's no longer with us, so I think there's a gap. So I think that being able to use our spaces to host what other folks are doing would be the natural fit at this point. I mean, obviously we could explore different possibilities, but that would be the natural fit that I see at this point. Our librarians individually do try to assist with like resume assistance and job help. So we do that on an ongoing basis, but it's not, I think, at the level that a
Right.
trained job coach
Correct.
would.
It's a light touch, not necessarily
Exactly.
intensive. Well, there's definitely some opportunities. Other thoughts on how we bring job coaches to people where they are?
I think maybe connecting, like doing some training with like our shelter staff, other shelter staff, and also like outreach on just like exactly what services are offered at Jubilee at Goodwill. I know our team connects with Goodwill a lot, but it would be good to make sure that there's sort of communication between Jubilee and like, our team and so just, you know.
So I know things can change over time, and sometimes printed materials can be a challenge, but we also have a lot of people that seem to really like our Lexington resource cards that point out key services like day centers and shelters and street outreach. Would we be interested in maybe having some kind of resources like that that were specific to certain areas, like maybe some employment materials that were on a card that was easy for people to reference? It could be staff, or it could be something that's distributed to a person that's actually job seeking.
Absolutely. Every day.
I see that as definitely something that's high feasibility, low cost. We would just really be focusing on the navigation piece. I think one of the things that's really challenging about our system that we're always trying to work to address is how you navigate our system. Even something like where someone goes to shelter, you have to have some knowledge of our system to be able to navigate. So I'm happy to try to put some resources behind those kinds of materials. Some of these items are going to kind of go hand in hand. Obviously, things like mock training and interview clothes, we might look at that more as a package deal or potentially address them individually. Wanted to ask a little bit more about what you all were envisioning specifically when you recommended partnerships with mental health resources and employment resources. Obviously, we've touched on the employment resources, but I think with the mental health, what does that look like for our providers? How can we better increase the level of mental health care resources that you have at your disposal?
I can share from our population that we serve. Generally, older adults with physical disabilities often have either undiagnosed or undertreated mental health issues. So knowing, like, I think New Vista recently said they have an urgent, after hours urgent care, to know what resources are available, especially via telehealth. Those that have appointments or walk-ins or urgent care type situations. Just having that, again, like David said, having that resource at your fingertips to really be able to point someone in the moment to a resource that they're not having to wait 3 weeks for an appointment on. But that's just one.
I think that's a really good place to start. What types of services do you think that you tend to see the most need for?
So really all behavioral health resources, both substance use disorder, mental health care, sometimes just people that are in crisis that really need some counseling, therapy to get connected with a mental health provider to get established. A lot of them are just not established.
I'm also thinking about, things like the Empath Center has been open now, I guess, just over a year, I think, or right around a year. But there's still probably a number of people that don't know all the details about how they operate. What other needs or challenges are you seeing around mental health resources?
I think it could be beneficial to engage some of the integrated care places, like I know specifically like Bluegrass Community Health Center that's right there, like Health First Bluegrass, because a lot of times people don't necessarily want the mental health care, so we kind of sneak them in with, here's your physical health, your primary care provider, and it just so happens they have mental health care. So figuring out how to engage them a little more.
Yeah. I can say that both Health First Bluegrass and Bluegrass Community Health are going to be partnering some with our winter shelter. So I see that as an opportunity to better connect some of what we're doing. We will have medical staff at the winter shelter that are going to be able to do more triage type services, check someone's blood pressure, check their blood sugar, identify if there's a need, and then, then route them the correct direction. We'll have Bluegrass Community Health that has a location right there where we are on Versailles Road. But then we also have Southland Drive not too far with Health First. Health First does have a new person leading up their healthcare for the homeless team, Cassie Turner, who's really great. So I think that we could definitely get her involved in some conversations.
And she's asked me to meet about how they can get involved with, outreach and just like doing more things in the community. So I think that's really something she is wanting to get going on. Also, like, they regularly tell me their mental health appointments are like underutilized. So I think if you're looking for a place to refer people with a shorter wait, that they would probably be worth trying, and they do a lot of telehealth too. So I think that having them involved could be helpful. But Cassie's great. So.
What about, obviously today, these kinds of days, we have a lot of telehealth that is available that does expand access. How do your clients, participants, how do they respond to telehealth? Do we think that is something that's a helpful strategy for this, or do we think that we might have more success getting someone into an office or a mobile clinic? What kinds of experience have you had?
Well, I'm at the college, and I don't think this is a fair assessment of necessarily the people that everybody in the room works with, but for us, telehealth has made them show up more because it reduces the barrier that they have to come someplace or that they have to go someplace. So if they can get Wi-Fi, they can usually have that. The problem is sometimes it's not a confidential space.
This is where my thinking was going.
Yeah, that's where the issue is, but it does cut down on the no-call, no-shows. It does make them show up. It's just an issue of, are we in a private place? Are you in a space where we can actually have the conversation that we need to have? And there's really no guarantee for that, right? Like, as long as I'm in the private place, that's the only thing I can really guarantee, no matter what situation I'm in. You can ask them to be in that, but as long as you can guarantee that you're in the space, sometimes that's all you can do. So I wouldn't let that be a deterrent. I would just be aware that that is an issue.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have public spaces that were available for telehealth appointments for this population.
That's a great
idea as well. I was thinking if there's places that we could approach that might be able to allow use of a room or a space for that would be a little bit more confidential. Hate to keep things. Do you think that the library might have any spaces that we might be able to partner? And obviously we would want to look at more than one access point so it doesn't overwhelm anybody, but just something, would that ever be something if we were to continue conversations that might be feasible?
I mean, it's certainly something we can look at.
Okay. Dave and I, before this, were talking about some different things, and we were also mentioning that we should keep in mind Lexington, when they open their remodeled transit center, has already had conversations about wanting to provide more services within the community. And I think that's definitely another opportunity that we would have in the downtown area, that we might be able to plan something, kind of meet a need like this. Other things that people would like to share around any of the ideas that we've talked about today or in the last couple sessions represented here on this document? I can tell you, Uber and Lyft, I tried exploring different opportunities that they had. Unfortunately, right now, they're not taking new partnerships with anybody. Definitely second chance employers. I think that we could better engage. Does Jubilee Jobs maintain a listing of second chance employers?
We maintain a listing. Now, I think we've been most effective when we've been able to like directly engage the employer. So I know that recently we had a meeting with leadership, HR leadership at Galls, for instance, and they told us what their matrix for backgrounds was without telling us what their matrix for backgrounds was. So we found the most success just directly talking to HR at local facilities, local places. I can check and see about an updated list because I know that we had a list, but I think it was a little outdated. But if we have one, that's something that we could share. But we're also kind of in this process of trying to find a pipeline, if you will, of just reliable people, right? So a lot of the problems we've had with second chance employers is that they'll kind of open a number of listings for us to send them referrals to. And so if the employer sees that there's a high turnover in those, after a while, they'll just stop. And so now, especially with newer relationships, we're making a more concerted effort to make sure that we are 100% sure of the person we're sending through so that relationship remains open.
Right. There might even be a potential to connect some of this. For example, maybe we do some work to engage second chance employers. We could host some events that employers could participate in if they want to learn more about working with us. And maybe if we did something like mobile job coaching, we could try to be targeting people for certain positions or types of work that are available through the partnerships that we form. Do you all have like a standard list of, and again, sorry to direct so many questions at the people who are talking. Do you have like a standard list of requirements for the second chance employers that you work with?
Not to my knowledge, but that's probably a question that I'll ask Mason. If someone were to have that, it would be.
Because I'm just thinking about it, if there's someone like me that might receive a contact from somebody, I might try to sell them the ideal of second chance employment. For example, sometimes this just kind of comes up just in the nature of conversations that we have. Blue Star Plastics recently contacted me about an issue, and during that conversation shared with me that they're a second chance employer. And I honestly did not know that about them. My only experience has been talking to them about these kinds of issues. So those are the kinds of opportunities that I think sometimes just naturally come up in my conversations, and I would love to be able to funnel them to organizations like Jubilee Jobs. If there's certain criteria I can pre-screen for, that even better. I'd be glad to try to make sure that they are kind of the right partner for you all before I'd send somebody your way.
And that actually gets to the question I was going to ask. I think, we, because of our capacity, right, are somewhat limited to the amount of screening or pre-screening we can of second chance employers. So from the city's perspective, and that can either be through your office or some other entity, right, at LFUCG, have there been any efforts there to try to engage employers to either ask if they are second chance employers or explore the possibility of being second chance employers?
For my team, I'll be transparent, that's a capacity issue as well. We don't just necessarily have the time and the manpower to conduct that kind of outreach and engagement. My goal is that we get there at some point, but as of right now, we're still just a team of 4, and with all the work that we have on our plate, that might be something that we would be better able to accomplish through a partnership with like our economic development team. So that's another thought in terms of this doesn't have to be all work that one entity does. It doesn't have to be just because Jubilee Jobs is a well-known employment support that we send everybody to them, or it doesn't have to be that my office is going to lead all efforts that benefit the population. We can definitely look at other entities that we can bring into the conversation.
Voc Rehab have a copy, have a list of second chance employers? A place like Voc, because
They may, are they working right now?
They're not,
I don't know.
no, they're not working right
I
now.
don't
I didn't know
know
they were
who, I don't
impacted
know
by
who
the
is and
shutdown.
who's not.
I'm gonna say, I'm not sure, just because we have noticed that in the last few weeks, we've got a lot of Voc Rehab clients in our orientation. So that makes me think they're not, but I can't say that with certainty.
I know in my direct service days, sometimes they were like waitlisted for services even under normal conditions, so there may be an impact right now from the shutdown. Let's take a look. Let's see.
Just in terms of, just thinking about like permanent housing and how sometimes income affects the portions of rent they pay, and sometimes that seems to be a deterrent for working. Maybe just some strategies, and whether that's through like the rapid housing standards, or just discussions or with case managers and programs as far as how to have some flexibility with incomes and when those need to be implemented in terms of increases in the participants' portion of rent. I think that sometimes seems to be a bit of a deterrent, I think, or at least it seems to be.
So I like the idea of also connecting this to conversations around things like our rapid rehousing standards. Since we have a couple new faces in the room, I want to make sure people have a baseline understanding of rapid rehousing. That would be medium-term rental assistance. It's going to be a cap of 2 years. Generally, we're serving folks that have slightly less acuity in those kinds of programs. But what we hear in some other committees of the board, like our program performance and evaluation committee, there's sometimes challenges in getting people successful and increasing income to a sustainable level within that 2-year time frame. Sometimes the conversations we have are around motivation. Sometimes the conversations that we have are around consistency in terms of giving people tools to keep them stable once they do have employment. Sometimes those conversations are really just more about the types of jobs that people have available to them, in terms of not being consistent, easy to document hours, or maybe fluctuating a lot, or just not having a livable wage. So how might you propose some flexibilities? Just want to make sure that I would understand where I'm thinking that you're probably addressing things like the responsibility for the participant rent.
Right, just within the regulations, like how long can they go before, or instead of, jumping directly to 30%, is there like once they get income, can it be slowly increased, or can you set other like smaller financial goals to help them get used to using some of their income to pay for bills, whether that's, it could be passed through utilities, or maybe that they start taking over the utilities before they take the rent, so they can kind of get sort of in that habit, or used to using their checks to pay for something that can go toward that, so that it's not such a big step to go from paying nothing to employment and then paying a bigger portion of rent, utilities, whatever that might be.
We did, I can't remember now, it's been so long, I've walked out COVID rapid rehousing programs. If we had talked about it or actually did some of it, but like graduating the rent. So it's like the first 3 months of the organization paid 100% of the rental assistance so they could save up, and then they started paying a percentage like every 3 months until they got to that 30%.
So I think where we're at currently is reassessment of income quarterly, which then would determine the level of participant rent. I don't think that we've stuck to a strict, like, first 3 months you pay 0, next 3 months you pay 25%. Originally, that's where we were, the first iteration of rapid rehousing standards that we had for programs, and the feedback that we got was that it wasn't dynamic enough, that it was responsive to changes in participant income. The way that it was done was pretty strict in terms of, regardless of what's going on in this time frame, this is the percentage that you're paying. And it felt very rigid and not meeting the person where it was, but those are local documents. We are required by HUD to have written program standards, but we as a continuum set them. And I do mean we, it's not just the Office of Homelessness. You all have a voice in that as well. We can re-explore that and maybe it could be something that does still have a dynamic element where it could account for a sudden loss of income, but maybe it does phase in some of that financial responsibility and prepare people.
Like I said, I've tried to block out rapid releasing programs.
Well, I can understand. We're trying to block out a lot of things about COVID. Although I will say sometimes when I didn't have to deal with people, that was nice. All right. So also on the subject of housing, I've had some very preliminary conversations with people about things like transitional housing. I know that a lot of our field has moved away from transitional housing to trying to more permanently house people immediately. But we don't have the level of resources to permanently house everyone quickly. What about the concept of transitional housing that was tied to someone's participation in some kind of employment supports?
Kind of how Goodwill.
Because I know we right now operate all of our housing programs. There's not a requirement of income. It's a housing first model. There's not a requirement that you be working or engaged in services. We hope that we'll be able to get you there, but the current approach is it's not a requirement at the onset. But again, just kind of building off of previous conversations, I think a lot of what we've talked about is that we need to kind of diversify the strategies and not just one size fits all. Definitely interested in hearing what you have to say. I thought you were going to say something.
It was kind of how we built a Hands Up for Housing with Charlie's office and Goodwill.
Yeah.
Is that, you have to be able to have employment. So sustainability was the whole key, is once we recommend them, then there was a requirement sort of being able to get employed, get housing that you're able to sustain. And so they actually provided that. And then they also would get at the beginning, they would get a career coach that would do actually an assessment. So they would actually look at if they had utility bills that wasn't paid. So then that they would work with them in helping them set that up. They would have to be required to do the budgeting class. So once they do the budgeting class, then they actually do their own personal budget. And so from that perspective, then they would move into, now let's try to find housing that can meet your income needs. And then once they're able to find that, then Goodwill will pay the first month rent and the security deposit. And then Fayette County Public Schools, like at that second month, if we would always follow up with that family to say, okay, so how are you doing? How's the rent going? So if they're struggling, okay, we're gonna help you maybe with your food. If the kids need any kind of support there, we've got that. So that we still kind of give them that support, but slowly kind of helping them to maintain on their own. So it had actually started working really well.
And I think right now it's shifted to being able to cover a little bit more than it originally did. I think it was initially just deposit in first month, but now it's up to 3 months. Is that correct?
I'm not really sure what the negotiation that Joe did with Charlie, but I know that they were working on something to that.
Pretty sure that's where it's at right now.
Yeah.
But so that could be one potential model for basically putting resources that would pair some startup assistance or financial assistance alongside some supports. We could also think about funding some kind of either site-based or scattered site physical transitional housing that maybe it's not startup assistance. Maybe it's something that people can access more immediately as they work through those steps.
Because there are incidents where a family, maybe like the car broke down or someone got sick in the family and it's like, oh wow, I've been able to maintain it, but I've had something that has happened, and so that's kind of thrown me behind. And then that's exactly where that would go, fit in really well.
I would say, like, granted, it's been open for like 2 months, but, you know, we've done transitional housing in some form or another for a long time. But that is, we set up several things that people could be doing to qualify for this transitional housing. And I think we have 16 or 20 people in there who qualified for that based on their employment. So I think that's something we've seen a lot of, is that people are seeking out that, and are working. And so then, you know, we are able to assist with maybe improving employment. You know, sometimes they don't have the best jobs or don't have jobs with benefits. So it's something that we can do, is like engage with them to, okay, you have these skills and you've been doing this job. Let us help you find something with benefits, and then work on the budgeting and that sort of thing to be able to save money to get out. So that's something that we've seen sort of early on here, is that more people in that employment area than we previously have probably dealt with out of just a shelter.
Because, again, thinking about conversations that I have, Kathy Wiesler, a landlord that several people in the room probably work with at Top Shelf Realty, has expressed to me that sometimes she has owners that might have something available, like a 4-plex or an 8-plex, that they might be interested in trying to partner with someone on. If we feel like that's something that we would have some agencies that were capable of potentially operating, we could definitely continue those conversations and try to fund some new strategies. Definitely want to make sure that we have enough time for our other items. Last call for additional thoughts around this subject, other things you want us to carry forward in researching and maybe doing some initial development.
Looks like Chris is on for targeted youth
And I
support.
don't see Chris today, but I can say we have not yet held a meeting. We put out a doodle poll to try to figure out when to schedule a meeting that interested parties would be able to attend. Only myself and Chris responded to the doodle poll. So I'd be happy to push that back out, or there's still folks that would be interested in participating in a group discussion around some targeted youth supports. The conversation from previous meetings was, for example, I think it came up during a Hope Center presentation. Chris noticed the number of youth 18 to 24 that were accessing the Hope Center, and kind of had some questions about if there is any special targeted outreach to those individuals. Are we still interested in trying to explore some of those possibilities?
Yeah, just send that out.
I also understand sometimes people receive a lot of emails from me, so it might be intentional that it wasn't looked at. I'll get that out so that hopefully by the next meeting we would have a more substantial update in that area. Looks like I've got about 3 more items. 1915I RISE initiative. That is the new initiative with Medicaid services that would allow individuals that are operating services, targeting the individuals who would have behavioral health issues, in providing them with supports like housing navigation and identification, housing supports, that potentially they can become enrolled in Medicaid and make those services billable as a potential to provide some sustained sources of income. That is still very much in development. Right now, what I can share at the kind of state level is we're really focusing on the access. It sounded like initially access was going to be very limited, that it would require that somebody meet with somebody for an assessment. Only a handful of those assessors are going to be available, and a lot of concerns about how we get people to them, where they're going to be located, if they're going to be mobile. So we're bringing some suggestions back to the state around how we make that a more accessible program. And then also kind of working to map out how people would receive supports on both ends, from the mental health side of things and from the housing side of things. But the main announcement that I want to make sure that you're aware of would be that there is going to be a Medicaid Academy offered through Kentucky Housing Corporation that I sent out earlier today. That is going to include an informational webinar, I want to say November 6th. And so organizations can go to that informational webinar to learn more about what the Medicaid Academy would entail. It's an 18-week course. Organizations that feel like they have the capacity to commit to that can work on a variety of different workshops and educational opportunities provided that help them get through that entire process of applying, developing all of their policies, building the internal capacities to do things like billing, all the way to the point of actually being a functional Medicaid employer. So definitely think that's a great opportunity. It's free of charge. They're going to be able to support about 20 agencies statewide. There is a requirement that you would submit a letter of intent. And I think that is going to be due to Leah Werner at CSH around the end of November, maybe November 21st or so. So definitely I encourage our providers to take a look at the email that I sent out. Think about if that might be a good resource for your organization. Register for that informational webinar. Consider throwing your letter of intent to Leah and see if you guys can get selected. I'm glad to put in a good word or provide a letter of support to any organization that would like to pursue that. Lived experience engagement. We have held temporarily on this item. Just within the last week, we have set the date for the initial meeting of the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness. So now we are going to work on planning our next lived experience engagement session. What we want to do is help provide persons that are directly impacted by homelessness with information about that task force. We want them to know that the meetings are open to the public. We want them to know the meeting schedule. There's going to be some town hall opportunities that we would want to potentially engage folks like our advocacy members in helping figure out, how can we pull together some things like transportation to help get people to a town hall session. But also my office can work through activities like this to collect things from individuals and make sure that their input gets back to the task force they can consider in recommendations. So be on the lookout for Marissa to send out additional information. If you have any interest in helping us get that word out, we can provide flyers for that. We're definitely glad to also look to see if there's anything that we can do to help you facilitate getting people to a central location for that. Final item of Marissa's is program standards update. This meeting, we actually have no documents to approve, but we are going to be meeting on November 19th at the Phoenix building. We'll be in the 5th floor conference room. Since that's not a full-on public meeting, you will need to be escorted up. So you'll check in with security and one of my staff will bring you up there. We invite our permanent supportive housing providers. You should have already received the current draft of those standards, as well as an invite with these details. But we definitely would also welcome input from any other COC members that would like to attend. If you would like to attend and participate in that, let us know. We can definitely send you the current materials to look over in advance of the meeting. We will also send a reminder about 1 week out from that so that you have a more fresh on your memory reminder. And I think I've gotten through my marathon. Now I want to open up to other issues and public sharing. I know we share a lot of announcements, but I also will throw out there that we can also receive issues that you want us to think about this group taking on and having a little bit more of a role in trying to address. I want to create a environment where our COC members and board members are also helping to plan our agendas and plan what work that we tackle. So any public sharing.
Do we have any in place besides the Salvation Army for women, or especially women who are pregnant?
I didn't hear the last part.
Women who are pregnant, do we have any places?
So I don't know of anywhere at the moment that is currently focusing on that area. I will say that I believe that Step by Step is looking at opportunities that they could potentially pursue to expand the level of resources, and that could involve potentially some things like transitional housing, but right now that's still in planning stages. Anybody know of any other resources specific to that population? Obviously, we will have additional winter resources, and that would include Community Action will have some additional funds to do short-term hotel stays during the winter for emergency family housing. And then the Bluegrass Care Navigators program as well. That one, it's not necessarily their target population. We're really targeting for the winter program more elderly, disabled individuals. But sometimes if there's a situation, we can always look at maybe a short-term medical respite stay if we need to bridge that to some other kind of resource, like a shelter bed opening up somewhere else. We are always glad to explore that if there's concerns around health that there might be a more significant need. Also, I just want people to know, Salvation Army, New Major has met with me recently. They definitely seem very open to feedback from the continuum and from the community on how they can, make any kinds of positive changes. I've gone through 4 or 5 sets of majors since I've been in this job. Very encouraging to hear that his daughter just started 7th grade, and his hope is to stay here long enough for her to graduate school. So if we can form some long-term partnerships, I think that's helpful to us instead of having different leadership every time we turn around. So really encouraged to hear that, wanted to share with the group.
She's probably really smart and will finish next year, so.
We got a duty houser over there. Other public sharing?
I have something to share. On Tuesday night from 6 to 8, we are having a family learning community dinner at 1625, which is a consolidated gym for families, anyone, or any community partners. They told me today to invite my community partners to come out. It's the National Center for Family Learning. We will be engaging our families. I'm actually in charge of the entertainment for the kids, so I will take the kids upstairs while they do some workshops and do some interaction with our families to just trying to find, we're trying to get some information from them. What does family learning look like for them? And so, and then being able to actually connect them to some of our community partners and engaging conversation with them on what it looks like. Where are you and how can we help you with it? So I have some flyers. If anyone would like to have one, there is a QR code on here. If you'd like to come, please register. So we want to make sure we feed everybody. So it is a dinner.
And of course, be happy to send anything out through the listserv if you want to shoot it my way.
If I could share, we are partnering with the city on a HUD grant that was received for a home modification program with Bluegrass Care Navigators. And I'd like to introduce Tony Smith, our, I would say new to us occupational therapist. He's been with BCN and in the OT world for
A long time. I'll say it for
It's gonna cut me off there. But just, and I have these, I'd be happy to share these. I'll forward them to Jeff as well if he doesn't mind to send them out on the listserv. But basically, it is a home modification program for elderly individuals who are living in Fayette County who are low income, at or below 80% of the area median income, and they can be renters or homeowners. So really focused on low-cost, high-impact home modifications that can help individuals remain in their homes safely, avoid having falls, avoid going to the nursing home. So Tony will be working with that team and going out doing assessments and helping individuals with applications, and also looking not only to do things like grab bars and raised furniture or accessibility features, but looking to connect them to other services too, that healthcare or mental health services, whatever it may be, to help them be able to stay at home. So I have some flyers. We'd be happy to meet and share more or send more information. Absolutely. I've got a whole stack of these, so thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely be happy to share out electronic versions as well. I'm sure you probably already connected with folks like Independence Place on that.
You know, I will need to. I don't.
They just, I know that some of their population won't be elderly, but they do see a lot of needs for disability-related modifications. I think that might be helpful to them.
Absolutely, and yeah, and feel free to send those. If you think of someone like, oh, you need to connect with someone, please send those our way. We'll start accepting referrals 11/1. So, and if you've got someone in mind, feel free to go ahead and send them our way, and we'll certainly make sure that we reach out and connect with them to see if they may be eligible.
Thank you for sharing, and welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you. Any other announcements?
I'll share. My last day with New Beginnings will be November 7th. I'm going to the State Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. Be working with their permanent supportive housing and homelessness program. So the OHA voucher program, path source, and I'll probably still be in y'all's world a little bit, but anything I can do to help, glad to. If you need anything from me before I go, let me know, or New Beginnings, I can get you connected with somebody else over there. And maybe just please be patient with them as they're transitioning away.
Congratulations, you know, I'm sad to lose you, but we are glad to gain a friend at the Department for Behavioral Health. All right, if that's all of our announcements, we are adjourned. I appreciate everybody. Oh, sorry.
Just a question, to put a really fine point on it. Is it the case that the information you shared about the winter housing is sort of the framework, but we don't yet have the application process?
So there's no application.
There's no,
It's a site-based shelter, so it's going to be much more similar to what Hope Center operated in 23-24. So the reason I really kind of felt like we should take a look at trying to shift back that direction was our primary goal with those resources is to keep people safe. And unfortunately, with a hotel-based model, we had a finite number of rooms, and if somebody needed to access something that evening, it wasn't easy for us to work them in. There was oftentimes going to be a wait for people to get into that program. So we'll have 216 additional beds for adult men and women. We'll be providing another email closer to November 1st that will give you all the fine details about like what time that we're going to open. We are going to encourage people to check in before a certain time in the evening to make it safer for people to travel to the shelter, but it will be available on a drop-in basis with no application process. I didn't want to prematurely adjourn.
So
All right. Thank you, TC.